It's delightful to be back in the area, so thank you to the council for inviting me. And it's delightful to be talking about market towns, because I'm partial to a market town. So partial, in fact, I bought one. Well, not all of one, I bought a bit of one. About 5 years ago, my family moved out of the M25 area and decided that we wanted to get back to something closer to the kind of areas I grew up in. And we looked specifically for a market town. Now, it's not in Yorkshire. It is in Leicestershire, and it's the great market harbour. It's even got the market built into the name. But in common with the other 350 market towns in England, and I think there are about 150 in Wales as well, they do have a number of things in common. And in fact, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the statistical background to this. I'll tell you why in a minute. But they have in common a number of things, one of which is that they have in some ways lost their original purpose, which was to act as key points in the agricultural supply chain. And they have structured themselves around having marketplaces, but actually for the most part those original cattle markets like the harbour one and so forth have gone away. But they still retain this kind of visual heart. They have this place in the middle where people can gather. The Greeks would have called it an agora. They have that visual heart, and the towns tend to cluster around this. They have other advantages because when there were real markets and that was their core function, they were drawing on a wide area, they tend to be fairly separate to other places. So they tend to have a kind of nice individual character, and we'll see a little bit of the character of the 5 towns we're talking about here. They all differ, they're all lovely. I really do like a nice market town, so I think this initiative is a useful one. So I'll tell you a bit about. There are no questions. So my background is really with independent retail. In fact, I was born over the shop that my dad was the manager of. And I spent most of my career working for the Independent Retailers Association, and in fact editing one of the magazines which any hardware retailer would have read. Unfortunately, we didn't give that particular shop Paxton's an award, otherwise it would have been our magazine with its cover on here. But working in publishing and writing a lot of stories about independent retail around the country, travelling around, I also got more within the trade association into speaking to central government in particular, and in particular at the point at which there were great concerns arising about independent retail particularly, but retail in general, because of the vacancy rate which was rising. But I knew the people who'd come up with a vacancy rate, and they were the local data company, who I just find fascinating. Nowadays I run my own company, EXP2, and about half of what I do actually is working with the local data company, because they were the only people who could tell me how many shops there actually were. Nobody else, certainly not the government, knew. But these 5 bars actually show us the vacancy rates as they stand at the moment in different sizes and types of place. And I think it's quite instructive, because we kind of assume that it's the same everywhere, but it ain't the same everywhere. Retail parks have the lowest vacancy rate at about 5.3%. As we'll see later, there ain't many shops in retail parks, but they're big, but their vacancy rate is low. If you go right to the far end, with a 12.3% vacancy rate, we've actually got shopping centres. Shopping centres in many cases are complete basket cases. There are big development of them from the 70s onwards, and many of them are empty. We'll see why, because their mix, the types of shops they've got, are the ones which are tending to close down. But the 3 in the middle are different sizes of town. So if you look at small towns, which is towns with up to 200 shops, medium towns, 200 to 400, Harbour is right in the middle of that particular one, Northallerton's in the middle one as well, and large towns, you'll see a step up. So 8.7% vacancy rate in small towns, 10.4 in medium towns, 12.1 in large towns. And by the time we're into large towns, we're into cities. And cities tend to have very big catchment areas for people, and they tend to have very big shops. And when they close down, they're very difficult to fill up again. But small is beautiful in some ways. Let's leave aside retail parks for the moment. Smaller the town, the lower the vacancy rate. The bigger the town, the higher the vacancy rate. And that has been true for the last 5 years. So it is a strength of market towns, which are generally on the smaller side, that they're in these 2 brackets. It's good news and it's helpful. So if you look at the trends, I will. This was the graph which made the government panic and appoint Mary Portas to sort it all out, by the way. And they did it at the point right at the top there where it was 14.6%. Since then, that vacancy rate's actually come down. I tracked this for the local data company. It's currently 12%. Now that's still 1 in 8 shops. Pre-recession, we're back in 2008, it's 5%. It's kind of the new normal, but it is actually getting better. There are reasons for it getting better, and I will be showing you some of the underlying things that are going on within it. We track 2 different types of vacancy rate. At the top here, we've got the all vacancy rate and the shoppy shop type retail vacancy rate. These are comparison shops which are selling finished goods, shoes, books, that kind of thing. Convenience stores, which will sell you food, basically, and that includes the big supermarkets, and service-based shops, which are becoming increasingly important. At the bottom, we separately track the leisure vacancy rate. So we see what was in the shop just before it closed down. And that vacancy rate for things like coffee shops and so forth is significantly lower than the rest of it. Although, oddly, it is rising, whereas the vacancy rate for the rest of them is actually very gently, very slowly coming down. I have to say, if you extrapolate these, and it's always a bad idea, I think, to rigidly forecast with rulers, just by taking the line and extending it and so forth, you don't end up at pre-recession rates until about 2035. Are we ever going back there? I somewhat suspect not. So if you actually look at where these shops are, LDC classifies these into 4 areas. The big blue area, 51.4% on the far side, is town centres. Now this is the DCLG defined retail cores. Even today, with that high vacancy rate where people think all our shops are gone, I'm often told they're all gone and I'm standing next to them and they're not all gone. More than half of shops are in town centres. About 9% are in shopping centres. Only 2.6% are actually in retail parks. But they're enormous. I did some work recently on the draft, the BOA draft rating list. So you get details on 1.8 million properties, and it actually says that the shops in here, on average, are 13 times the size of the ones in there. I promise I won't talk about business rates, but on average, the 416,000 places specified as shops are rated at 18% more per square metre in terms of their space than the ones on retail parks. So we're able to track with local data company because we've got 45 people on the road going around towns very regularly. We get 65,000 reports of what's going on in these places, classified where they are they open, are they vacant, and it tells us how many shops are opening and closing. Now this was some figures worked out for them for last year. 47,000, nearly 48,000 shops closed in Great Britain. So Wales, Scotland, England. Because otherwise we always have to go England, Scotland, Wales. And about 46,000 open. So we actually lost shops last year. The difference is just at the bottom here, 1,650. Most of that was in the first part of the year, pre-Brexit vote. After that it improved. I'll show you that in a minute. But the really interesting thing, I think, for anyone concerned about their towns is that number at the top, 47,000, hasn't varied nationally by more than 200 either side of that number for the last 5 years. If you're going to plan for what's going to happen to your town centres, expect to see 10% of shops close. The question is, how many are going to open in their place? And how can you encourage it to open? Nothing is going to stop them closing in bulk. Individual cases, it will be different. But it is so consistent. Sorry about the big wiggly graph, but bear with me, I did say it would get a bit nerdy. This is one of the things I track for LDC on a monthly basis now. And this is just over the last year. So the green line is the openings of shops. The blue line is the closings of shops. And the red line is the difference between the two. So as you can see, first part of last year, there was a drop in activity for both openings and closings. It's almost as though the high street held its breath, waiting to see what would happen in June. After that, there was a big bounce back. But for 3 months, the losses were outdoing the gains. Things were actually getting a bit worse. You saw earlier we had a net loss of 1,650. By that midpoint in the year, we were 2,000 down. Then, although the activity levels begin to drop after the sort of September peak, openings begin to exceed closures. And the red line you can see at the bottom here is above zero. We've now got 9 months of growth with that. It's really quite fascinating. We've never seen this before until I started nerding around with the figures. But actually, those two levels at the top could drop significantly down, but as long as the green one's above the blue one, things are getting better. Really wiggly graph this time, but this is 5 years. You saw earlier the percentages of shops we've got in those different locations. The red line is town centres. These are DCLG town centres. And as you can see, over 5 years, from 2012, loss, gain, loss, 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 but not big. Actually, town centres have lost net less than 1,000 shops over the last 5 years. They lost a lot before then, but actually it's been quite stable since then. I'll come to the yellow one in a minute, but shopping centres, green, they bounce up and down a bit. They've had good times, they've had bad times. Retail parks, once they got away from the recessionary year where everybody lost in 2012, they've carried on gradually gaining every year. On average they gain 35 shops a month, but they are 13 times as big as the small shops in those other areas. The yellow line is everywhere else. And the everywhere else is interesting because we term it standalone. It can be a standalone shop in a country area. It can be a non-DCLG core area, which I'm not sure whether Bishop Road would qualify as that, but I suspect you're standalone in that respect. And that's actually, over the years, where the big losses have been. Away from the hearts of towns. The losses have actually been in the secondary precincts, in the smaller streets, in the edges. And they have had to fight, as you obviously have done very successfully, in order to counteract that. This one's just for any independent fans in the audience. I will quite happily say I'm one of them. There's another one in the front row here. The blue line, this is just over the last year. It's very similar, as you would expect, to the openings and closings we saw earlier. The blue line is independents. Independents, by now, are on a 9-month growth spurt. These are net gains, so there's still lots of them closing, but more opening than closing. And the red one is chain stores, especially in town centres. And they have been getting rid of shops in town centres for the last 10 years. And yesterday, Mothercare announced that they're going to close 70 out of 151 shops as they go more and more online. The actual effect of them closing is not those big dramatic events like the shutting of Woolworths with 807 front doors closed in one day, or British Home Stores with 130 shops going. Big as these things are, the real numbers come from the people with these big companies shifting the way they're doing business, the number of shops they think they need to have. At one point, the belief was if you wanted to have a national chain, you needed 600 shops. Yesterday, Mothercare told us you could do it with about 70 or 80. So if you want shops, get independents. However, there's a big risk with them. This is, by the way, the 5-year version of that. And as you can see, after that recession in 2012, independents have been on the up all the way through. Look at the multiples last year, net losses. Quite deliberate closures. These aren't collapses of companies for the most part. They're getting rid of their shops. If you want new shops, get independents, but beware. They're much more volatile than chains. There are twice as many independent shops in the country as there are chain stores. 65% of them are independent. They outnumber them 2 to 1. But they churn at twice the rate. So actually, you'll lose 4 times as many independents as you will chains. The mix for towns is a very, very subtle thing. I was asked, whether I want to talk about this as a recipe and so forth. Well, it's getting the ingredients right, which is the important thing. Getting independence is not a panacea, and I say that for somebody who spent decades working with independents. And I have a lot of friends in that area, but looking at the numbers, there's a concern that it can't just be one way of solving problems. You can see because of the fonts, we've got some creative alignment of text at the top. But bear with me, I'll just explain this really nerdy chart. I've divided it into 4 groups: comparison, non-food, convenience, food, leisure, coffee shops, service, barbers. To give an example. Multiples, what they've done in 2006, they got rid of nearly 1,000 comparison shops net. They got rid of over 700 convenience stores, which is a surprise to a lot of people. They opened 400 leisure shops, and the big leaders, as we'll see in a minute, are coffee shops. And they got rid of 1,200 service shops. Any idea I can show you what they are in a minute. Guess what the leaders among these losses are in service kind of outlets? Banks, absolutely, yeah. Look at the independents, comparison shops, they're losing more than the multiples. They're gaining more in convenience than multiples, with a lot more independent convenience stores opening. I'm doing a report at the moment for local data company on supermarkets, discounters and convenience stores, and this comes through very clearly, and it's a bit of a surprise. Right at the end, service. Whereas the multiples are down 1,200, the independents are up 1,300. I'll show you what they are in a minute. But when you come to, well, in fact, vaping shops comes quite a lot at the top. Well, I suppose the drug dealers, really, which is a service. When you look at the totals, you can see the comparison. Shops selling you things are on a long-term down. Convenience is mixed. Leisure is up. Service is up to a little extent. These trends are what people building futures for market towns need to understand. They're real, they're national, and they do apply here as well. Very quickly, don't be in London if you want to be successful with these things, because in London they're losing independence and multiples. Partly due to property values, one guesses. Don't be in the southwest either. Bit dodgy in the east end, but everywhere else gained independence. As we saw earlier, independence all over the place. But most areas have in fact lost shops, because we know that we lost 1,650 last year. If you look at them by classification, I showed you those 4 classifications. They are over 5 years. Comparison shops down every year, with the yellow service shops bouncing up and down, up at the moment. Convenience stores had big growth, but they're coming down. What will happen if Aldi actually deliver on the suggestion that they might open another 1,000 shops? Is anybody's guess at the moment, because there isn't a lot of room in a market which is seeing negative growth at the moment. There was actually a cut in the number of supermarkets in the country last year. It's only 0.3%, but it's quite significant, because when you were talking earlier about massive expansion of supermarkets and so forth, that's long gone. That race for space has ended. And in fact, what big supermarkets, they tell me privately, they've got a footfall problem with their big stores. What Tesco are going to do with their 200 extras under these circumstances is fascinating. I suspect they will turn them into internet warehouses, at least part of them, because they're huge, these things. Leisure is on a roll, as you can see. So there we are, top openings by category last year. Vaping shops. We classify them as tobacconists, but they're vaping shops. Barbers, beauty salons. If you look down that side, although tobacconists are categorised as convenience, really I think they're service providers. Mobile phones, you're buying service contracts rather than phones. It's service and leisure all the way down. That is the future for what shops are becoming in towns. And top closures by category, banks. They spotted it as banks, way ahead at the top, with more announced to be coming through. It's a good thing that post offices are now able to enable you to do banking with, I think, 75% of high street banks now, and it's going to be more and more important in the future. So get post offices. But this is a chart of online sales. So is it all down to online sales? Is that going up hugely? I met a venture capitalist at the World Retail Congress 2 years ago, and he said, everyone gets very excited about the growth rates of online retail. He said, but actually if you look at it globally, it's going up by a market share of about 1% a year. He said, I'm a venture capitalist, I'm not interested in anything which expands by 1% a year, because it's coming from a fairly low base. Food stores, as you can see, are way down the bottom, which also means that they're the ones most in the firing line, because at the top, when you come to all retail, and particularly the non-food, you've got bookshops where more than half of books are sold online. Now actually, helpfully, that's turning over a bit at the moment. People are buying books again, rather than e-books. But different markets give you different results. So if you plot those two, the one I started with, and the ONS figures for online sales, you might expect that they should go together. But they don't. Online sales continue to go up, vacancy is coming down. But I think what's going on underneath it is we're shifting away from comparison-based shops in town centres. Don't go, above all, for things like women's fashion shops. Not that I've got anything against women's fashion shops or shoe shops, but they are directly in the firing line of the loss of business. More of those have been lost than any other type of business over the last few years. This is a really horrible chart. I was trying to bring together a number of measures to see how the towns actually compare with national balances of those type of retailer within the town. They all have different characters, we said earlier, but I've tried to lay out for you what's happening in terms of trends across those markets. So it's quite important to realise where we are at the moment. And one of the things we see is that your vacancy is pretty good. These are not unhealthy towns. Harbour is also pretty good as well. If we look at picking up particularly, one thing I find in market towns, particularly things like Market Harbour, is that they tend to be heavy on comparison stores. People are selling books and dresses and things like that. This is not a safe thing to be doing, because that is where the losses are coming in. And it's ever so characteristic. One of the other ones is that leisure tends to be deficient. You tend to have fewer cafes, despite the growth in these numbers, fewer restaurants and things like that. We have to book in Market Harbour. I used to live in London, you never had to book anywhere unless you were going to the Ivy, if you wanted to go to a restaurant. In Market Harbour, we have to book a week ahead, because, oddly enough, they are deficient in numbers for those. But you can see, looking at this, and this is information available 24/7, should they wish to see it, by the council officers, because this is all derived from the local data company's dashboard. So you can see that the individual towns have different balances of these things, so they're more exposed to the risks with some of them than others. And when you're thinking of the future, these are the kind of things you need to take into account. Now, LDC has a health index, and actually I think it needs several health indices. This one was developed with Morgan Stanley, and really it's designed for big cities. It doesn't work so well for other areas. But it takes a whole range of measures and it reduces them to an index from 1 to 10. And actually, we're pretty much on the right side here of everything. You wouldn't want to be below 5. Northampton is the standout. Market Harbour, bit of local pride to me, sorry about that, is an 8 out of 10. What is interesting is that where actually they lose points big time is the population per unit of shop score. That is, when you take the drive time, which is one of the things we've been doing with the supermarket stuff, how many people are there to buy your goods? One of the markers of a market town is it tends to have big green areas around it. Its drive time is usually the same as its actual population. This doesn't mean these are bad places, because we've already seen that they have relatively low vacancy rates, but it also means that they are constrained in some ways with success because of the population which we're reaching. Now the standout is obviously Northampton, because we know that its 10-minute drive time is utterly irrelevant and that people apparently come from Mars. to go to Barker's and places like that, and I'm sure they will when the prison is redeveloped as well. The vacancy scores we've looked at a little. There is no vacancy problem structurally that we can see with the towns. It's got very low long-term vacancy, so these are all good. The one thing I would say is if you're going to do something, get a cinema. Cinemas are a really good thing, and we haven't got one in Market Harbour. It's in terms of population, it's twice the size of Hambleton. Get a cinema is a really good thing to get. The bias towards large cities really comes in when you look at anchor retailers, because only 2 of those have got significant anchor retailers. But anchor retailers will only go where there's a big resident or drive time population. And as we have seen, they're pulling back on it. Marks and Spencer's are closing shops. I think they're only in 150 market towns as it is at the moment. And they look for a big local grouping. This is from the VRC in Springboard, because people are changing what they do as well. These are the footfall figures that they gather and publish for the last 5 years. And it says that the footfall they measure in towns particularly, you'll see there, is down by 6% in 5 years. But the population's up 3% over that period. Town centres down 10%. I have rounded these, 9 and a bit. Shopping centres down 9%. Retail parks up 5%. Getting a shopping centre is a good idea. Having it significantly far out of town can be very, very dangerous. And that footfall figure tells you why. I want to show you this because one of the things which the footfall measurement brought up, I'm actually showing you something from central London. I just want to show you the way it works. Is one of the things that's invisible but important, given that we know that leisure is more and more important to towns everywhere, is the nighttime economy. It's very often ignored. It's a second use of the town. It brings people in when otherwise you would expect the streets to be quiet and echoing. But actually, a good leisure economy enables you to make use of your place to best effect, to bring more income into the town, to keep people there. This is actually in central London. I did want to use the one from Market Harbour's Christmas fair on the 6th of December last year, when Church Street, which is full of independents, blossoms into life late at night as thousands of people go down there because they have real live reindeer. This one, unfortunately for technical reasons, I can't do this, but to show you the principle of the way, when you see the heat map come through, this is the day, the Friday just before Christmas last year, so it was an unusually arranged time. This is actually in central London with local data company monitors, which we do have in Harbour as well. And in fact, we're in the middle of putting 1,000 of these out around the country with University College London in a massive project to try and see what's happening to town centre footfall. So what I've just done is animated. This couldn't be less like a market town in Yorkshire, because this is the centre of London. Here's Holborn Station, Chancery Lane, the British Museum, New Oxford Street and Shaftesbury Avenue. But the principle's interesting because rather than just looking at a graph, you can see the redder it gets, the more people there are. So it's early in the morning, people begin to turn up for work at Holborn Station by 10 o'clock in the morning. Shaftesbury Avenue's busy, New Oxford Street's gone bonkers, that's all offices over there. Oh, and it's stopped again. Damn it. Please don't do this to me. Well, like I said, children and animals. Hambleton's doing the right thing. He's measuring it with the LDC data so he can compare with others. This is something other councils, and in this case a bid is doing. This is a bid in central London, Midtown bid, which is another thing you can get. Get a bid, they're good as well. Is you can actually get a view on what's happening when you're not looking at the streets, when you're not paying attention to who's around. There are a number of things you can bring, but I would say the key thing in terms of the future of towns is to look at the data you've got. Not too much data, but think about things like how many houses you're going to build in these places in the next 5 years, because these are the questions you really need to ask. How many people are there actually going to be? How many restaurants are they going to want? We need to look at the data ahead. We need to compare ourselves with other people as well. But actually, in order to have decided to do all this, the one thing we really need, And I think you've got here, and I congratulate you, it's the most difficult bit to get at all. And it involves both councils and people, very often retailers, because they are there, as we saw down in York, is local leadership. If I were to identify one thing, which I think you're doing, and just the fact of this conference today is evidence for it, is that key thing, apart from understanding, is local leadership in doing something about it. Thank you very much.